Okay, I've beat Captain into submission. He's going to tell me how he got to become Captain of the Delta Queen. So here it is, Volume 7 of Captain Harold DeMarrero's River Stories. Take it away, Cap.
Well, let's see. Like I said in earlier tapes, I spent all my life on the river. Fifth generation to end up being a captain on a riverboat. And I've worked in just about everything there is on the river. I worked as a deckhand, as a cook. I worked as in the engine room as an oiler and a steersman, pilot, and captain. And I've did it for many, many companies. And actually got to the point where I was port captain for companies, vice president of operations for companies, and all of this before the Delta Queen. Well, every 3 years I would go to work for a company and get it to running like a fine clock, and then I would get bored with it and I would look for something else to do. So the last time, in the last talk, I was talking about being in the Coast Guard. Well, when I was getting ready to come out of the Coast Guard, a friend of mine, had been a friend of mine for many, many years, called me and said, how would you like to be a job as pilot on the Delta Queen? And he was pilot there too at the time. And I said, well, man, that would be great. So anyway, I was finishing up my job at LSU, and I started making some trips, even before I was finished on the Delta Queen, as a pilot. And I worked there, started off finally took a full-time pilot job with Delta Queen. Ended up having to go up and extend my license, get more license so I could run more places. That meant drawing more river to get my license, my pilot license. And worked around for a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years as a pilot. And then an opportunity came up where one of the captains had been fired. I don't know whether you recall, back when the Delta Queen landed broadside on a dam below Hannibal, Missouri. But the result of it was that he was terminated. But he wasn't the one who put the Delta Queen on the dam. That was the pilot.
He just let it happen on his watch.
Right. He was in charge of the vessel, but she, the pilot, was in charge of driving the boat down in there. And she absolutely, I won't say what her name was, but she was one of these people who...
was she qualified?
No. She was a qualified steersman, but she wasn't a qualified pilot, especially during high water. She had just got her license extended to Hannibal for this trip, and it was high water, and she should have never accepted the job. I tried to warn the company. I said, it didn't make any difference whether she was a female or a male. She didn't have the experience, and I told them that. And they said, oh, we won't allow her to do that. And so...
high water changed your go-kart into an Indy car.
Well, it almost sunk the Delta Queen. It almost sunk it, man. They had 3 giant holes where the piers on the dam cut into the side, and had the Delta Queen not been built the way that it was built, with like an overhang, like an aircraft carrier overhang, and that absorbed most of it. It ripped the hull open to about 18 inches above the water. Or if it hadn't it was sunk, and a lot of old people would have been killed. But
is that what mostly rides at Delta Queen, older people?
The what?
Is that what mostly rides on a Delta Queen? Older people?
Yeah, older people. Because, I mean, first of all, who's got the time to take a week or two off and ride on a boat up, for 5 miles an hour up and down?
Who's some of the more famous people that rode the riverboats a lot?
Rosemary Clooney, that's one of my favorites. I had dinner with her and escorted her off the boat in Cincinnati. You know, that was. But there was a lot of movie stars and that rode the Delta Queen, plus the Princess Margaret, or one of those from England, the Chinese, all kinds of top officials.
Yeah, you told me an interesting story about the Chinese delegation coming over.
Oh yeah, I was I was captain, and they sent on the Delta Queen, and they sent a delegation here from China, because they have the Yangtze River in China, and they operate passenger boats, and they wanted to come over and see how one was operated on the Mississippi. And so they got on, they didn't make a full trip, they got on at Natchez. And of course they came on with this interpreter, government, State Department guy that came on with them, and he was going to interpret and make sure, you know, everything was done right for the Chinese.
Did you show them a good time?
Oh, we showed them a great time.
Did they show any appreciation?
They showed a lot of appreciation. They were the most gracious people I ever saw, because, you know, these guys were workers.
They share a little ceremonial alcohol with you?
Oh, yeah.
And how'd that go?
Well, they brought this bottle, and, you know, you as a captain, I had them at my table for captain's dinner the last night. They all had their mouth suits on, was sitting around the table, and they brought out this bottle. As a matter of fact, I've got it around here somewhere. Here it is. And they said, we only serve this to dignitaries in China, you know. And so they opened it up, and they poured it in these little snifters around the table. And I says, well, I kept waiting. I said, well, go ahead. They said, no, you first. And so, man, when I put it up to my face, I didn't know whether to take a sip or to drink it all, and it smelled like kerosene. So, I don't know where I was going to
taste any better.
I tossed it all down to get rid of it. And all of the top dignitaries tossed theirs down, but one of the rest of this group, they just took a sip, and immediately they filled all our sifters up again. And we did about 3 toasts, and I was toast. And I was sitting there, and I told this State Department guy, I said, I want you to tell this guy exactly what I say. Well, what are you going to say? I want to tell him what's wrong with communism. And he said, oh no, you can't do that. I said, you do it. You interpret exactly what I say. And he pretended like he did, but I know he didn't. And he probably says, he thinks you're a nice guy. Said, but it was quite an... And then the next day they were very gracious when they left the boat. And they all, you know, bowed and shook our hands and everything. So I think it was a good thing.
How many years was you on the Delta Queen?
11 years on the Delta Queen. And it was 11 years that I'll cherish. I enjoyed it. When I left there, I was a Commodore. I was the boss of all the boats in the fleet and all the employees on the boats.
On our first show, I said you was the first or the only Commodore. There was 3, right? And
yeah, there was one Commodore at Zumwalt, I think his name was, and then there was another one before me. But I was the 3rd. I'm the only living Commodore left of the Delta Queen.
Okay, I had to straighten that out. Okay, that's it for this volume of Captain Harold DeMarrero's River Stories. Please come back and watch the next one. Thank you very much.